Chapter 1. The Message That Changed Everything. I was sitting in my office cubicle, drowning in quarterly reports and debugging code that seemed to mock my every attempt at fixing it when my phone buzzed. The notification was from Sarah, my wife of 7 years. The message was simple, devastating, and completely out of nowhere. "We need to talk. I want a divorce." My coffee mug slipped from my fingers, sending lukewarm liquid cascading across my keyboard. The world seemed to tilt on its axis as I stared at those 9 words that had just shattered my reality. Sarah had never been one for dramatic gestures or cryptic messages. She was straightforward loving and had always been my anchor in life's storms. I immediately called her. Straight to voicemail. The drive home from downtown Seattle felt like an eternity. Every red light, every slow driver, every mundane obstacle felt like the universe conspiring to delay the inevitable conversation that would determine the rest of my life. My mind raced through the past few months, searching for signs I might have missed. Had Sarah been distant? Were there arguments I'd forgotten? Was there someone else? Chapter 2. The Confrontation. I found Sarah in our kitchen mechanically chopping vegetables for a dinner we might never share as husband and wife again. She looked up when I entered, her eyes, red-rimmed but determined. "You got my message," she said, not really a question. "Sarah, what's going on? Where's this coming from?" I set my keys down carefully as if any sudden movement might shatter what was left of our marriage. She set down the knife and turned to face me fully. "I can't do this anymore, David. I can't pretend everything is okay when it's not." "Pretend what? What are you talking about? I thought we were happy. I thought—" "That's just it," she interrupted, her voice cracking. "You thought, you assumed, but you never asked." I felt like I was drowning. "Asked what, Sarah, please? You're not making sense." She walked to the living room, and I followed like a lost puppy. She sat on the edge of our couch, the one we'd picked out together at IKEA during our first year of marriage, laughing about the incomprehensible instructions. "Do you remember what today is?" she asked quietly. I panicked, running through dates in my head. Our anniversary was in March. Her birthday was in August. My birthday had passed in September. No. Should I? The look of pain that crossed her face was like a physical blow. "Today is the day we lost the baby David. 3 years ago today." The world stopped spinning. How could I have forgotten the miscarriage that had devastated us both, the tiny life we'd never get to meet, the dreams we'd had to bury, along with our hopes? It had been early, only 8 weeks, but it had felt like losing everything. Chapter 3. The Unraveling. "Sarah, I started, but she held up her hand. "You forgot. Just like you forgot last year and the year before. Just like you forget everything that matters to me." Tears were streaming down her face now. "Do you know what I do every year on this day? I visit the cemetery where we buried the ultrasound picture. I sit there for hours, talking to the baby we never had, apologizing that their father can't even remember they existed." My legs gave out and I collapsed into the armchair across from her. The guilt was overwhelming, crushing. How had I become this person? How had I let the most important things slip away? While I focused on deadlines and code reviews and performance metrics, "I'm sorry." I whispered the words, pathetic and insufficient. "I'm so sorry, Sarah. I didn't mean to forget. I didn't mean to hurt you." "I know you didn't mean to," she said, wiping her eyes. "That's what makes it worse. You didn't forget because you stopped caring. You forgot because you never processed it. You never grieved. You just moved on." She was right. After the miscarriage, I had thrown myself into work, into projects, into anything that would keep my mind occupied. I had convinced myself that staying busy was the same as staying strong, that providing for Sarah financially was the same as providing for her emotionally. "And it's not just the baby," Sarah continued. "It's everything. When was the last time you asked me about my day and actually listened to the answer? When was the last time we had a real conversation about anything other than bills or schedules or whose turn it is to take out the trash?" I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing came. She was right about that, too. Chapter 4. The Real Problem. "There's something else," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Something I've never told you." My heart clenched. Here it comes, I thought. The affair. The other man. The real reason she wants to leave. After we lost the baby, I started seeing a therapist. Dr. Martinez. I'd been going for 2 years. That wasn't what I'd expected. Why didn't you tell me? Because I knew you'd try to fix it. You'd research therapists and make appointments and turn my healing into another project to manage. I needed something that was just mine. I wanted to argue to tell her she was wrong, but I couldn't. Because she wasn't wrong. That's exactly what I would have done. Dr. Martinez helped me understand something important, Sarah continued. I've been depressed, David. Seriously depressed. Not just sad about the baby, but clinically depressed. And living with someone who doesn't see me, who doesn't really know me anymore, has made it so much worse. The pieces began falling into place. The quiet mornings, the early bedtimes, the way she'd stopped initiating conversations or making plans. I had attributed it to the natural ebb and flow of marriage, the comfortable routine of long-term partnership. I had been blind to my wife's suffering. The divorce, I started, is what Dr. Martinez calls a wake-up call, Sarah finished. She doesn't think I should actually divorce you. She thinks you're a good man who's lost his way. But she also thinks that unless something dramatic happens, unless you're forced to see what you're about to lose, nothing will change. Chapter 5. The Wake-Up Call. I stared at my wife, really looked at her for what felt like the first time in years. The laugh lines around her eyes had deepened, but not from laughter. Her hair was shorter than I remembered, and she'd lost weight. How had I not noticed these changes in the person I shared a bed with every night? So you don't really want a divorce? I asked, afraid to hope. I don't want to be married to the person you've become, she said carefully. But I'm willing to fight for the person you used to be. The person who brought me soup when I was sick, who remembered every anniversary of our first date, who used to ask me about my dreams and then help me figure out how to achieve them. I can be that person again, I said desperately. I want to be that person again. Wanting isn't enough, David. I need to see action, real sustained change. She stood up and walked to the bookshelf, returning with a manila folder that she placed on the coffee table between us. What's this? I asked. Divorce papers, real ones. I had a lawyer draw them up last month. My blood ran cold. But I also have this, she continued, pulling out another document. It's information about couples counseling. Dr. Martinez recommended someone. If you're serious about saving our marriage, if you're really willing to do the work, then we start therapy next week. Chapter 6. The Choice. I looked at the two documents, one representing the end of everything I held dear, the other offering a chance at redemption. The choice should have been obvious. But I knew Sarah was right about one thing: wanting wasn't enough. I had to be willing to examine myself honestly, to confront the ways I'd failed as a husband, to commit to becoming the partner she deserved. There are conditions, Sarah continued. First, you start individual therapy too. You need to process your own grief about the baby, and you need to understand why you shut down emotionally. I nodded. That made sense. Second, we establish weekly check-ins. Real conversations about how we're feeling, what we need, how we can support each other better. Okay. Third, we create new traditions. Ways to honor our baby's memory, but also ways to build new positive experiences together. I'd like that, I said, and I meant it. And fourth, she paused, her voice becoming softer. You need to understand that this isn't about going back to how things were. We can't go back. We have to build something new together, something better. Chapter 7. The work begins. The next few months were the hardest of our marriage, but also the most honest. Individual therapy forced me to confront truths about myself I'd been avoiding for years. I learned that my tendency to solve problems by staying busy was actually a form of emotional avoidance. I discovered that my fear of vulnerability had created walls between Sarah and me that I didn't even realize existed. Dr. Chen, my therapist, helped me understand that grief isn't linear, that healing isn't a project to be completed, but an ongoing process. She taught me to sit with uncomfortable emotions instead of trying to fix or escape them. In couples counseling, Sarah and I learned to communicate in ways we never had before. We practiced active listening, emotional validation, and expressing needs without blame or defensiveness. It was awkward at first. We both kept slipping into old patterns, but gradually we began to find our way back to each other. The weekly check ins became sacred time. Every Sunday evening, we'd sit together without phones or distractions and share our experiences from the week. Sarah told me about her students, her fears about the future, her dreams of maybe trying for another baby someday. I shared my struggles with work life balance, my anxiety about being a good husband, my own dreams of becoming a father. Chapter 8 New Traditions. We created a ritual for the anniversary of our loss. Instead of Sarah visiting the cemetery alone, we went together. We planted a small garden in our backyard with flowers that bloomed around the same time our baby would have been born. We wrote letters to the child we'd never meet and buried them beneath the roses, but we also created celebrations. We instituted monthly adventure days, where we'd try something new together, a cooking class, a hiking trail, a museum we'd never visited. We started a travel fund and began planning the trip to Ireland we'd talked about for years, but never prioritized. I learned to ask better questions. What was the best part of your day? Instead of, how was your day? What would make you feel most supported right now? Instead of assuming I knew what Sarah needed. Chapter 9 The Revelation. 6 months into our healing journey, Sarah revealed something that completely reframed our story. I never actually wanted a divorce, she admitted during one of our Sunday check-ins. Even when I sent that text, even when I had the papers drawn up, I was hoping you'd fight for us. But you seem so certain, I said confused. I was certain that things couldn't continue the way they were, she clarified. I was certain that we needed help. I was certain that dramatic action was the only thing that would get your attention. But I was never certain I wanted to end our marriage. So the whole thing was a desperate attempt to save us, she finished. Dr. Martinez called it relationship triage. Sometimes you have to stop the bleeding before you can heal the wound. I felt a mixture of relief and amazement. My wife had been willing to risk everything, including her own comfort and security, to save our marriage. She had been braver than I had ever been. Chapter 10 The Truth Revealed. As our marriage continued to heal and strengthen, more truths emerged. Sarah confessed that she had been considering leaving for over a year, but had held on, hoping things would change naturally. She had dropped countless hints that I'd missed or ignored. She had tried to initiate deeper conversations that I'd redirected toward practical matters. The divorce threat hadn't been manipulation, it had been a last resort from a woman who felt invisible in her own marriage. I shared my own revelations, how work had become my refuge, because I felt inadequate as a husband after the miscarriage, how I'd convinced myself that providing financially was the same as providing emotionally, how I'd been terrified of addressing our grief because I was afraid it would break us both. You know what's unbelievable, Sarah said one evening as we sat in our garden surrounded by the flowers we'd planted together. How close we came to losing everything because we couldn't figure out how to talk to each other. What's unbelievable to me, I replied, is how much stronger we are now than we ever were before. Chapter 11 The New Us. A year later, our marriage looked nothing like it had before the divorce scare. And that was exactly the point. We had learned that comfort can be dangerous, that taking each other for granted is a luxury we couldn't afford, that love isn't just a feeling, but a series of choices made every single day. We still went to couples therapy monthly, treating it like maintenance rather than crisis intervention. I continued individual therapy, finding that it helped me be a better partner, friend, and person overall. Sarah's depression had lifted significantly with proper treatment and support. We'd learned to fight better, addressing conflicts directly rather than letting resentment build. We'd learned to celebrate better, acknowledging small victories and moments of joy instead of waiting for major milestones. We'd learned to grieve better together with support without shame. Most importantly, we'd learned to see each other again. Really see each other. Chapter 12 The Real Ending. People often ask me about the secret to saving a marriage, and I tell them there's no secret, just willingness. Willingness to be honest about your failures, willingness to do the hard work of change, willingness to prioritize your relationship, even when it's inconvenient. Sarah's text about wanting a divorce was the worst moment of my life, but it was also the beginning of the best chapter of our marriage. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to accept the status quo when the status quo is slowly killing your relationship. The truth behind my wife's divorce threat. She loved me too much to let us fade away quietly. She was willing to risk everything to save us both. And that more than any romantic gesture or grand declaration showed me what real love looks like. It's not just staying together through good times, it's fighting for each other even when it would be easier to walk away. Today, 3 years after that devastating text message, Sarah and I are expecting our first child. We're terrified and excited and better prepared than we ever would have been if we hadn't learned to communicate, to grieve, to support each other through the darkest moments. Sometimes the most unbelievable truth is the simplest one: love isn't enough to save a marriage, but love combined with commitment, communication, and the willingness to grow can create something beautiful from the ashes of what once was. The divorce papers are still in our filing cabinet, not as a threat, but as a reminder of how close we came to losing everything and how grateful we are that we chose to fight instead. The end.